Good evening and welcome to Mental Health Matters After Hours. It's the show where we cover all things mental health and well-being because we know that you might need support anytime, day or night. Our special guest today is Linda Beswick. Her focus is on positive psychology counselling. However, she's also going to talk to us about endometriosis. Now, in terms of the statistics, it can take 7 to 8 years from experiencing symptoms to get a diagnosis of endometriosis, and this is down from 11 years. And the Endometriosis Society says that this is because the symptoms can be wide-ranging and are similar to those of other conditions, so it's not always apparent straight away. For this reason, it's important to give as much information as possible, so keep a diary of your symptoms and so on. But even still, we are talking about years of living with a condition that can be quite debilitating. Let's head over to the main studio. Linda, welcome to Mental Health Matters After Hours. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
This is a really important topic, but before we get on to endometriosis, I wanted to talk to you about your own work and your focus on positive psychology, because part of flourishing and thriving is having that empowerment and courage to speak up, whether it is about symptoms, diagnosis, or any form of illness or wellness. So can you tell me a little bit about your work and how you support your clients in finding their voice?
And my business is not only about endometriosis, it's about supporting anybody with positive psychology and coaching psychology. And it's about looking at what is good with us and what is strong with us and what we can tap into. So that can be applicable to any area, you know, career, goals, health and wellness, mental health. And I've got, I used to work as a mental health support worker for about 15 years back up north. So I've got 15 years of experience working with people with mental health as well, which has given me a really unique perspective in my coaching.
I think that's really important, because one of the things people sometimes struggle with when it comes to mental health is that flourishing and thriving, it's going from feeling okay to flourishing and thriving. A lot of people seem to think that feeling okay is just not being unwell, and it's kind of, it's not being well and moving to feeling okay is one aspect, but feeling okay and moving to thriving is completely different, actually. And
that's
I think
really good point.
That's an important diagnosis, important distinction to have.
Yeah.
But also you have a passion for better care when it comes to diagnosis and the treatment, especially of endometriosis. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about the disorder, as well as why it takes so long to get a diagnosis?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've got endometriosis, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it. And endometriosis it's where the cells in the lining of the womb grow throughout the body. And they still don't know why or how. It's a really under-researched and underfunded area. We think there's genetic components to it, but it's not the case for everybody. It's so difficult to diagnose because it can present as so many other illnesses. If you write down all the symptoms of endometriosis, you could literally say it's chronic fatigue, it's irritable bowel, it's, you know, so many different things. And I don't know why, but it seems that every other option apart from endometriosis is thought about first. It seems to be the last option. So one of the theories is that we're actually born with it now, because it's been found in fetuses.
Wow.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Me.
for me personally, it's genetic. My mum has it, her mum had it, her mum before that probably had it, but it wasn't known about back then. But it can cause, it can travel throughout the body, and it's been actually found in the brain, in the lung. And there was somebody famous that died of thoracic endometriosis recently.
Wow.
And mine had gone into my bowel, unfortunately, as well. So it can literally go anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
It's awful.
Because it's almost like a cancer. You know, I don't want to equate, but it sounds...
Yeah, it is. The cells do seem to behave like that. I mean, with cancer, they do radiotherapy and chemotherapy, don't they, to try and get rid of the cells. So in endometriosis, they used to laser it and now they excise it, which they cut it away. And if any of those cells are still there, estrogen feeds it and it grows.
Yes. It's really interesting. We've been talking a lot more about hormones this week, and it's just, that's another example of what hormones are doing that we may not be realising.
Yeah.
So with I think that's really interesting that you said they will go everywhere else before endometriosis. And do you think that's due to lack of training, or do you think that's even us maybe even just going, oh no, it's not that bad there, it's not, we tend to be a bit stiff upper lip as patients as well.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers to unpick with endometriosis. There's the medical history of females' illness, which is really, really interesting. Endometriosis was all about a wandering womb back in the day, and it came up and we had to get it back down with smells. And it's fascinating. But I think there is an aspect of women being quite stoic as well. But then adding to that the sort of reflection that people put back of us, it's just a pain, it's just period. Just a painful period. Yeah. That's what it is. Well, actually, periods shouldn't be painful. I mean, we would expect a little bit of aching and, generally not feeling tip top, but they shouldn't stop you from walking, going to work. They shouldn't make you sick. That is not right. That's not okay. Yeah. And it's a falsehood that we've been sold, I think. There's a lot of medical misogyny, a lot of gaslighting going on, because they just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said about women being stoic, and I think that happens a lot, either because they feel they have to, or they just just get on with things. But if you know that something's not right, and it isn't just period pain, and it isn't IBS, for example, how do you kind of keep going back and saying something's not right? Because it can actually be quite daunting to say that to a doctor who said it's just IBS or it's just this, and think, well, actually, no, I know myself, something isn't right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the crux of it. We go to GPs because they're the experts.
Yeah.
And the way I dealt with it was I reminded myself that they're a GP, they're a general practitioner, they're not an expert in gynecological issues, including endometriosis. So that was what sort of spurred me on, along with the fact that I knew that I was right. I knew there was something wrong.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, trapped wind, for example.
Yes.
So, and it seems to be, unfortunately, part of the journey that we are disbelieved and dismissed. And again, it's got ties to the history of endometriosis and how medical it's a very male model. Back in the day, we used to give birth in caves with other women around us, whereas now most gynecologists are men. And it's that, I think, as well. But saying that, one of the GPs that I was gaslighted by was a female. So it's not the only reason. There's many different layers. It's also really hard to fight when you're in chronic pain and when you're being kind of rejected.
That's a really good point.
Time and time and time again. But you've just got to believe yourself and trust your own body that there is something wrong.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. You get to the point where you're just too tired and you can't keep arguing, so you go, oh, all right then. But you have to if you know something's wrong. So doctors might say things like keep a symptom diary, which might sound quite formal to some people. What might be a simple way of women to keep track of recording their symptoms so that they can go to the doctor kind of fully armed?
Yeah, I think it's really important, both from a symptom aspect, but also when I used to go into GP's appointment, I used to get really anxious. And the more I was rejected, the more gaslit I got, the more anxious I became. So everything out the window. So it's not only a tool for you to track what's going on and the lead up to your period, or is it in between your period, but it's also a reminder of what you want to discuss in that appointment, because that is your time and you should take the reins in that appointment. So what I usually do is just note it down in my notebook, and it's really important to write down every symptom. So when I was at my poorest, I had shoulder tip pain, and I'd never had shoulder tip pain, and I dialed 111 because it woke me up. I couldn't sleep.
Wow,
gosh. And they were like, oh, I've never heard of that one before. But it turns out that it's a sign of internal bleeding. And it can be a sign of an ectopic pregnancy as well. So there's loads of symptoms that you might not actually think are related to your endometriosis, but they are.
Oh my goodness me.
It feels like trapped wind. And I know then when it's starting that I've got that feeling again. So, and this is the other component to it. No two women are the same.
Of course.
Nobody experiences it the same way. Again, is why it's so hard to diagnose.
Yeah.
But
keep a track of every single symptom.
That is so important. I mean, your point about the shoulder pain, because also, and it's funny you talk about the medical approach being still very male. I remember in my first aid training, which was only last year, they did a whole thing about heart attack, which is great and really important. There was a video we watched about the man having the heart attack and how then afterwards the trainer, credit where credit's due, did say, of course, women's symptoms are completely different to that, or could be completely different to that.
But there was no video.
No video. No. We don't get to see one of us having a heart attack.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Linda, you're staying with us, and we will be back just after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters After Hours. We're here with Linda Beswick and we are talking about endometriosis, the difficulty of diagnoses, and also, in many ways, medical gaslighting and what happens when we're dismissed by our doctors. Now, this sense of feeling alone, feeling you're the only one, you're the only person who's experiencing this, that can actually be a big barrier to having the confidence to speak up. So, in your coaching work, how does your practice help us address some of those feelings of, oh no, I don't want to cause trouble, I don't want to take up space, I don't want to assert myself, even though you know your body, like you said?
Yeah. Well, social connection and feeling connected are massively important for our psychological well-being. It's the basis of many psychological theories. But with a chronic illness, not only just endometriosis, but any chronic illness, you become very isolated.
Yes.
But it's important that we seek out others in the same way. And back in the day when I had it, the internet didn't exist, so it was really difficult to find connections. But now we're so fortunate. We've got so many social media avenues. There's Instagram accounts. There's a hashtag, endometriosis warriors. So that social connection is a lot easier to find.
Yeah.
My research is specifically looking into the effects of social aspects. So I'm offering one-to-one coaching, which will be part of my PhD, to see if that's the better modality, but also coaching in groups, because I think that social connection and with relatedness is so important that in itself could help. So there's two aspects to coaching, really. It gives you that inner confidence, but also the connectedness. So both facets I'm going to be offering as part of my business as well. Not just for endometriosis, but for everything as well, because coaching helps everybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right there is so much comfort in a group session where someone says something and then you kind of almost have the confidence to go, oh, I felt that, or I've experienced that. And you're absolutely right. You can feel really isolated, and sometimes your illness makes you even more isolated as well, which is hard. Yeah. Now, why do you think women, maybe in particular, struggle to assert ourselves or come back? You know, we don't want to contradict the doctor. We don't want to, especially when it's another woman. Sometimes as well, because then we feel almost, am I betraying the sisterhood in some way? What can we do about that when we know, and yet we're a bit scared?
And I think you've hit one of the nails on the head. It is actually harder, I think, to discuss it with a woman who then rejects you because they're a woman. They should understand. One of the hardest comments I had was from my female manager who said, well, you can't be in that pain all the time. And that hit me harder than a man because, well, you should understand. But not all women get the pain.
No.
But I didn't that at the time. But again, the system is set up that they are the expert, you're the kind of customer, and they decide your future really. But you know, it's not the case. You have to keep fighting. As much as it is difficult to say, you know, why am I not being believed? You've just got to keep going back and saying this is not right. And gynecology in its own right there's just massive misogyny and gaslighting in it. It seemed to be like a second-class illness for some reason, and that women aren't in charge of their own bodies and uteruses.
Goodness.
Even to the extent that you can't even request a hysterectomy. But I think talking with others, getting that support, it's kind of like that backup, you know, to say, this isn't right. There's other people in the same boat as me. And that gives you strength to keep fighting.
That's really interesting about the hysterectomy as well, because as you know, you think, well, this is my body, but you have to like double check it with so many different people. And
Yeah.
I was watching, I just off on a slight tangent, sorry.
Okay.
It was the latest American Horror Story, Delicate, and it was based on Delicate Condition. Now, American Horror Story does its own thing with the stories, but one of the key aspects of it was at one point, it's a woman who is pregnant saying, I don't want to take these drugs, I don't want to be injected. And yet the doctor spoke to her husband to get his consent, nothing to do with her, just completely ignoring her. And that was in many ways there to make us think this is happening now.
Yeah.
And that is utterly frightening.
It really is.
Oh, gosh.
Goodness me, that's shocking. So when it comes to endometriosis, what symptoms should we be looking for? And at what point do we say, this is not going away?
Yeah, I think just generally having a painful period that stops you from doing things is a massive symptom. Heavy bleeding, heavy clotting, again, it shouldn't be that bad. Painful sex is another one that's it's really difficult to talk about, but it's a really big symptom of endometriosis, as well as going to the toilet. It can affect your bladder. You can get endometriosis in your bladder, but also it affects the bowel massively. A lot of women get diarrhea with it. Again, it's quite an embarrassing illness. I feel like it's the title of the show, Embarrassing Illnesses, but there's a lot of things that, you know, blood, you know, we shouldn't discuss blood, you know.
It's true.
Diarrhea, it's not a topic for conversation because we're women, you know, but we've got to talk about it. We've got to be honest and open. Symptoms like fatigue. I would work full time, I'd come home, I'd sleep, I'd eat my tea, I'd go back to sleep. I was constantly fatigued. Back pain as well is a massive one, because endometriosis, it's been described as having glue poured in your abdomen because it sticks your organs together. So you can imagine that pain. I describe it as like a sticking, sort of stretching pain, and I get it in my back. And
that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like everything is glued together at its worst. Yeah, for sure.
Stabbing pains as well. Things like anxiety and depression are other symptoms of it, because it has a massive psychological impact.
It's so if someone's experiencing all of those symptoms, and really a GP, that should be flagging up with a GP. Oh, I wonder if it's this, but there are a lot of other issues that present in a similar way, which means that, as you said, endometriosis is sometimes the last condition that they think of. So what other conditions might present like that?
General IBS is one of the first ports of call. Illnesses such as polycystic ovaries, adenomyosis and fibroids, they can all present in the same way. And even appendicitis. I got rushed into hospital with suspected appendicitis. It wasn't, but you know, it can hide as many different illnesses. But I think if you're thinking it's endometriosis or some other gynecological issue, ask for that referral to a gynecologist.
Yeah, very good advice.
I think that really is. Oh, Linda, you're staying with us, and we'll be back just after this.
Does this feel alright? Just
Yeah. It's like like a thousand memories come back all at once, you know?
would you like to start this story?
Well, I suppose what's most important is that this isn't everyone's experience of addiction. This is mine. And I suppose if you want to know where to start, we have to start with the reasons why I became addicted.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters After Hours. We're here talking with Linda Beswick about endometriosis and also her work as a positive psychology coach, which really helps us to begin to find our voice, especially when we're dealing with illnesses which are sometimes dismissed by the medical profession. And that's what I wanted to come on to next, although I'm jumping in because it's actually your questions, Jude. I'm so sorry.
It's absolutely fine. We're just wondering what your experience with the medical profession has been like.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been quite poor for me. I wasn't believed about my illness, and it took about 12 years until I was rushed into
12 years.
Appendicitis.
12 years, and even then it was wrong.
Yes, yes. And my mum had it, so it shouldn't have been a surprise. But I was scanned and they found cysts all over my ovaries. I was in quite a mess, and they actually thought it was cancer.
Oh, no.
They thought it was cancer, not endometriosis.
And that's frightening as well. That puts you through another round of psychological trauma.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it shouldn't have taken that to get a diagnosis. But also the length of time that took caused irreparable damage to my ovaries. They had to reconstruct my ovaries, but that damaged my egg reserves. So that led to a whole host of, other issues further down the road. So I can't have children.
That's awful.
And I ended up having a hysterectomy because it just got progressively worse. And again, I wasn't believed by GP after GP after GP. Even though I'd already been diagnosed, I still wasn't believed. So then I demanded to go back to a gynecologist.
That's just dreadful. So as well as having to cope with the physical symptoms for all those years before diagnosis, then the aftermath of the diagnosis and what the delay had done to you physically, how did that impact on your mental health?
It was really difficult because it's then not only you. It becomes like my husband at the time. It affected him because I couldn't have children, which meant he couldn't have children. Yeah. There's all the guilt of, I can't give my mum grandchildren. And, it's just, there's so many repercussions from endometriosis that just constantly affect you, and it never goes away. So even now I've had a hysterectomy, but I'm in the menopause now, so I have to take HRT. But the HRT has got estrogen, which feeds the endometriosis. So
gosh,
people think that once you've had a hysterectomy, you haven't got endometriosis. Well, I do, because it's deep infiltrating, so it's still in. So yeah, it's a forever condition, and it's a whole body condition, which I don't think it's thought about. It's not just a physical thing.
And with diagnosis, you were talking about laparoscopy. Laparoscopy. That's it. Sorry, I can't even say the word. We were talking about that in the break, and that's got to be unpleasant, violating in so many ways as well. All these sorts of internal examinations, and this is a bit of a personal question, and that's got to be so uncomfortable. I mean, when we even then get seen, can we then say, actually, I want a female nurse, or I want a female doctor, or something like that? Because that in itself, you've waited so long for a referral, you get it, and then suddenly you're uncomfortable in that situation.
Definitely. And I think it's massively important that you do stand up for yourself and say, I'm really not comfortable if it's a man, and whether that's I want a chaperone in with me. or I would prefer it to be a female. Because there's loads of things like, and I know that men are equal in as being a nurse and stuff, but they don't understand what it feels like for a woman. So for me personally, I did ask for a woman, just because I know that I felt more comfortable. And it is massively invasive.
Yes.
Like the internal ultrasound, it's not comfortable. It's not nice. But you do have to just try and stay as relaxed as possible and think that this could be the bit that helps me get diagnosed.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because I find smear tests uncomfortable. It's not a nice thing to be doing. It's a very vulnerable thing to be doing as well. And that you mentioned earlier, when you're in pain, when you've got all of those other things going on as well, you need to be comfortable because this is your health in question here. With that, I like the point about the chaperone. We can ask for that. We are allowed to. That's so important because I don't think many people know that.
Yeah, you can ask for your friend or your mum or whoever, but you can also ask for another member of staff as the chaperone.
That's actually really useful to know because say you have just been dropped off by a parent or a friend or whoever and they don't want to come in or can't for whatever reason, to know that you can then ask for another member of staff is really helpful. And these are things which I don't think we talk about enough and we need to get that information out there.
No, I think you're right. They sent one of the female receptionists in recently. I had a male doctor and, a sensitive thing. I didn't even potentially need a chaperone. But yeah, so it's just one of the receptionists that work there, and that's classed as just being okay.
No, that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
And before we let you go, Linda, do you mind telling us a little bit about your research? Because this sounds really essential work that you're doing.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I decided to do a Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology, and as we were doing the work, it was kind of like I had an epiphany where it was like, this could really help women with endometriosis. And actually, I was doing a lot of positive psychology myself without knowing I was doing it. So one of my positive psychology looks at your character strengths, and one of mine is love of learning. And that got me through the majority of my endometriosis. So when you sat at home, you don't really do much. So I taught myself how to knit. I taught myself Formula One, and it was learning that got me through everything. And learning still is something that I do to deal with things. So it's about finding what your strength is and tapping into that. And the socialness as well, and having agency of what we can control and what we can't. There's just a massive framework, I think, that can be adopted and utilised, not just for endometriosis, but chronic pain as well. Yes. So I'm looking at different facets of coaching, but plus positive psychology interventions. Because something as simple as going out for a walk can be a positive psychology intervention. Yeah. And again, that might not be possible for somebody with endometriosis. So it's thinking outside the box as well, and making it a personal intervention for that person, keeping your hope, keeping your meaning, keeping your purpose in life. Because as well, if your purpose, or you feel that your purpose is to be a mother and you've always wanted to be a mother,
of course, if
endometriosis stops that, what then have you got? So it's about reframing everything, and coaching helps with reframing. So it's a massive thing, and I'm hoping that the more I read, I mean, I'm only in my first year of the PhD so far, but everything I read so far is more and more rabbit holes that I'm going down of ways that I could potentially bring an intervention or a framework in.
I love it.
And I'd love to give that to the NHS or a charity to be able to support women, because I just think it's a massive gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're very sort of new to the literature review at the moment, but could you give us your 3 top tips in sort of helping women get that support that they need?
Yeah. So be confident in yourself, be confident in your body, and be confident in what you're feeling. You are the expert in your own body. Nobody else knows your body like you do. And if you know that this pain is not right, you need to be confident in yourself. And never let anybody tell you that you're not experiencing it. And then my second tip would be keep a note of all the symptoms. That's a must. You've got to do it. Get a little symptom diary. There's loads of cute little diaries and planners and stuff, and make it something enjoyable as well. You know, bring it into, you know, this is my little world that I keep note of everything, and put gratitude in there and loads more positive psychology things. And then the final one is ask for a referral to a gynecologist. You're entitled to be referred, and you can complain if they refuse to send you to a gynecologist.
That's important to know.
Definitely, but we've got to be realistic as well that the waiting times are ridiculous for gynecologists at the minute. So it's not a quick thing, but has to be referred.
Thank you, Linda. That's so helpful. Where can we find out more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I've got a website as well, and it's all under LB Coaching Consultancy.
Amazing. We shall put that with the show notes. Linda, thank you so much. That's just been such a fascinating conversation, which I feel we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg with. So you please do join us again when you'll have more insights and be building that framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to Test the Trend. In the same vein as today's show, where we're talking about getting a second opinion, I thought I would just simply give you some helpful questions that you could ask your GP about any particular topic that you need to address. If you have a pen and paper, please feel free to write these down, or just pause the recording and then and grab a pen or something like that. But these are the questions that I think you might want to ask. Number one, what do you think is causing my symptoms? And that can be really helpful when you haven't had an answer and you've been dismissed and you've tried taking whatever they've said to take and it hasn't worked. What do you think is causing the symptoms? And if they give you an answer to, oh, well, maybe it's IBS or maybe it's this, if we're talking about, say, endometriosis, you can say, well, that's what X GP told me. That's what so-and-so GP told me. And that way you might begin to narrow it down. So number one, what do you think is causing the symptoms? Number two, will you want me to have a scan? What sort of scan? And what are you looking for? Again, exactly as Linda said, love of learning is really important. Learning more, finding more information. Will you want me to have surgery? If so, what will you be doing? That's another question related to the scan. With endometriosis or anything that is involving your sexual organs, will my fertility be affected? Do you think my fertility will be affected? And then more general questions. How can I control my symptoms? What treatments do you suggest and why? Don't forget to ask the why. Don't forget to ask people to explain themselves. And then finally, are there any options that I need to consider? Now, that one is actually really important. And this comes from my own personal experience. Before I delivered training in the NHS in learning and development, I did a lot of temping in the NHS just to get my foot in the door. And I worked in a stoma care department. And there, every month or so, we used to get pharmacists and hospitals and all of that coming in, and they treat the doctors and they treat the nurses with yogurts and food and all kinds of things and be trying to sell their stoma bags. Now, one thing I will always say about this particular department is the head of the department would always stick to the stoma bags that she knew her clients, her patients wanted and used and were happy with. Because she said to me, and I asked her about this, she said, the whole thing about stoma bags is they are a really personal care thing that you're using. They are a really personal, very intimate care area that you're dealing with when you have a stoma bag. And if you can't trust it, or you're trying something new just because a pharmacy company has said, oh, we've got these, could you give them a go? That's really not helping the patient. So when you think about the options that you need to consider, if you're happy with the options you're using, stick with them as well. Or at least ask to stick with them, because there can be many reasons why doctors are telling you to try something else. So just bear those in mind. Another fascinating show, and raises more questions, I think, than it answers, but questions that probably need to be asked.
Definitely. And, I had endometriosis when I was young. I was diagnosed with it, but even I learned a lot there. There was a lot about it that I didn't know, I wasn't aware of.
I think
so that's really fascinating.
it's talking about the appendectomies
Yeah.
that are happening.
Yes.
And that's what happened to you.
Yes, I had my appendix taken out, and then I'll never forget it. I was lying in my bed, just had my appendix out, and the doctor came to me, and he was really quite cross. He was like, "There's nothing wrong with your appendix." Oh, I'm sorry about that. You took it out, exactly. And he said it's endometriosis. So, but I have kind of, I felt guilty about, I'm so sorry that I had something wrong with me that you didn't know what it was. So, and interestingly enough, I was talking to a girl who I know who's 20 earlier this week, and she's been diagnosed with endometriosis, and she says she feels that. She feels like she's doing something wrong by having the condition. And Linda she alluded to that as well.
That we feel guilt and we feel...
Yes, and it potentially, it's because you're a woman, you have these conditions. So, and interestingly, I had it a long time ago. I was 21, and I was told you need to have a baby now because you might not ever be able to have one. So I was literally given that proper medical advice to go and have a baby. And of course, that brings up so much. I was 21. I felt like a child still myself, and I didn't. But the girl I was talking to this week, who's 20, she was given the exact same advice. Nothing has changed, and it just feels so archaic.
Archaic.
The advice and the treatment. So yeah, it's an area that needs a lot of work, I think.
But it's also the way you say that kind of advice is what advice.
Yes.
I get it. I understand what they're trying to say.
Me too, but it was presented literally like that, almost as a throwaway comment. Well, you just need to have a baby now. You might never have one otherwise. So that's very hard when you've got everything going on as well, to have that thrown in the mix.
That's really interesting, because endometriosis is a young disorder, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's something that you have at a young age, and it takes you till you're a bit older before it gets diagnosed, by the sounds of things.
Yes.
And I had an interesting conversation again this week with somebody who talks about when is the right time to have a disorder or a disease, because
Yes.
If you're older, it's like, you've lived your life, so that's okay. You can have it now.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're young, you're fit, you're strong, you can have it now.
Yeah.
No. Because when you're young, you may have to grieve the life that you were thinking you were going to have.
Yes.
When you're older, you might not have the physical health to fight it in the way that you would have wanted to, or you've got all these other responsibilities you're dealing with. There's no good time to be ill.
There's no good time to be ill. There's no consolation by the age that you are when you're diagnosed with something. Surely that can't be something that we're expected to use as a comfort. Yeah, because your age is such that actually it makes the condition not so bad. No.
That's a whole show as well. As I said, these shows tend to bring up more questions than answers. But again, really important discussions. If you've been affected by anything that we've been saying, we do have support in the show notes, but also do leave us a comment and let us know your experiences. And have a good night.